welcome to American Catholic History. If you like our podcast, be sure to rate us and give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Noelle Heaster-Crowe.
And I'm Tom Crow.
Today we're talking about Mother Mathilda Beasley, who was born a slave but became a wealthy woman in post-Civil War Georgia, only to give it all up to serve the poor. To do this even more effectively, she founded the First Order of Black Nuns in Georgia.
Mother Beasley is an interesting case. Not much is really known about her life, but what is known is remarkable.
She really shows us what matters most in life, and it's not living a life of ease and comfort, as much as I wish it was.
I know, really. I mean, she could have had ease and comfort after she inherited her husband's wealth, but she chose to just give it all away and work to earn a living and to support orphans and the poor.
So let's start with what is known about her early life. She was born Mathilda Taylor in either 1832 or 1834 in New Orleans. Her mother, Caroline, was a black slave woman who was owned by a man named James Taylor. Insert.
Yeah, really.
Caroline's on my mind.
Oh, my goodness. I know I never made that connection. Oh, man. Goodness gracious. We'll just leave that one right there. The next line of that song came up and no. Anyway, but exactly who her father was is not known. Some speculated that it was James Taylor himself, but most believe that her father was of Native American heritage, which doesn't mean it wasn't James Taylor, just that.
Right. Well, this potential Native American heritage is credited with giving her her significant height as an adult. It was said that she had a commanding presence.
You can also see something that kind of looks like Native American heritage in the only known photo of her, which shows sort of height and prominent cheekbones and somewhat lighter skin.
We should point out that there are two photos that are thought to be of Mathilda Beasley, but one of them is of a darker complected petite woman wearing a dress from the 1890s. Mother Beasley would have been about 60 at that point, and the woman in this photo is definitely younger than 60, so not her.
Yeah, the other photo is more likely her. But let's move quickly to her adulthood because, well, really nothing is known of her the nearly first 20 years of her life. One source we found indicates that she was baptized at the Cathedral of St. Louis in New Orleans, but that is not certain. One thing that is clear, however, is that she receives an education far beyond what slave children typically received. When we finally do pick up her story once again, she was able to read and write, conduct business, and to teach others.
Now, this part of her story starts in the 1850s when she was about 20 years old. Somehow, before this point, she became a free woman of color and made her way to Savannah, Georgia. There, she made money as a seamstress. But she was also doing something else which was potentially very dangerous for her.
Right. She was secretly educating slave children. Naturally, since she had been born into slavery, she had sympathy with the slave children in Savannah. And since she had been educated as a youth, she knew the importance of education. So she began teaching them in her own home secretly. But this was somewhat of a dangerous thing to do because long-standing Georgia state law forbade educating slave children, and if she had been caught, she would have been fined $100 and received 32 lashes with a whip in the public square.
This in spite of being a free black woman. But that didn't matter. Such was the punishment for a black person being caught educating slave children.
Yes, a black person. If a white person were caught educating slaves, the punishment was a $500 fine, but no lashes. Only black people, even though not slaves, were threatened with a public whipping if they broke this law. But she did it anyhow and was never caught.
Now, to be fair, many people, black and white, took similar risks and were not caught. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the authorities conveniently didn't notice what was going on. The education of slaves was very much, at least in that part of Georgia, an open secret. Most everyone knew it was being done, but no one talked about it, and everyone who did it was discreet about it, so nobody made a fuss.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean there was no risk. If the unforgiving state authorities, rather than the local authorities, decided to start doing raids, they wouldn't have been so likely to turn a blind eye.
No. And also the fines were no joke. $100 in 1850 is a bit over $4,000 today, so a $500 fine would be more than $21,000. I don't know about you, but I don't know when I had a $21,000
Yeah,
fine.
really.
Yeah, those are hefty fines for the crime of educating people.
Yeah, so discretion on the part of teachers and pupils was necessary. They would change the location of classes, they had hiding places in their houses for the students, and students would conceal their books in their baskets as they walked to and from class, like hiding them under dung chips used for fuel.
So Mathilda Taylor educated children and worked as a seamstress up until the Civil War in the first half of the 1860s, when everything went into, well, upheaval. That
Yeah.
seems like a tame word to use for it.
Yeah, I suppose. Now, we're not sure what she did during the war, but when it was over, we find her working at a restaurant in Savannah called the Railroad House. She became close with its owner, a prominent and well-off black businessman named Abraham Beasley. Beasley was a widower, and he had a son. He also had land holdings in and around Savannah and owned several fairly successful businesses in town.
He had also made money in a somewhat surprising way. He had, in some way, been involved in the slave trade.
Yes, such a thing was not entirely unheard of.
No.
Yeah, Mathilda and Abraham were married in 1869. Before getting married, however, since the Beasleys were Catholic, Mathilda was conditionally baptized. Conditionally, because she had no actual record of having been baptized back in New Orleans. They had no children of their own, but they lived a happy marriage until Abraham's unfortunate death in 1877. In his will, he left all of his money, holdings, and business interests to Mathilda. So she was suddenly a very wealthy woman.
But not for long. She donated the entirety of her newfound wealth to the Catholic Church. Some say her motivation was at least partly to atone for her late husband's profiting from the slave trade. She didn't think it right to live in comfort on money so ill-got. So she donated it and intended for it to be used, at least in part, to open an orphanage for black children.
So in the late 1870s, she returned to making a living as a seamstress. But during this time, she also developed a desire to become a nun. Now, there weren't many opportunities for black women to enter religious life in the United States at the time. Some states just forbade religious communities to be mixed, so orders of white women wouldn't be allowed to admit black women.
And we've encountered that before in this podcast. In Mathilda's hometown of New Orleans, Mother Henriette DeLille had faced this sort of discrimination in establishing her religious community, the Sisters of the Holy Family.
At least initially, Mathilda Beasley took another approach. In 1885, she went to England and entered a Franciscan community in York, England.
The inspiration for this step may have come from meeting the Poor Clares, who came to Savannah in 1884. One of the nuns in this community had previously belonged to a Franciscan community in York, England.
Now, there's no direct evidence that Mother Beasley did significant work with these nuns, or that their presence influenced her decision to join the Franciscans, but the timing of their arrival in Savannah and of her subsequent departure for York does kind of suggest a connection. But regardless of how it came about, she spent 2 years in York before returning to Savannah, where she desired to establish a new community of Franciscan nuns.
Unfortunately, none of the Franciscan orders would officially recognize her organization or welcome her into their community. Likely this was in part because of the civil laws that forbade black and white sisters to mix. But like Mother DeLille, some 30-some years earlier, she didn't let that stop her. With the help of Sacred Heart Church in Savannah, the parish where she had donated all of her late husband's wealth, she opened an orphanage for black girls in 1887, the St. Francis Home for Colored Children. 2 years later, in 1889, despite the lack of formal support from any order of nuns, Mathilda Beasley established the first community of black nuns in Georgia as Third Order Franciscans. As foundress, she became known as Mother Mathilda Beasley.
The orphanage functioned on some donations and support from the parish, but mostly through Mathilda Beasley's determination and hard work. Money was never in plentiful supply, and the kids they took care of weren't always the easiest. In fact, in 1895, a group of unruly teenage girls caused damage to the orphanage by setting fire to it more than once. Yeah, but still, Mother Beasley persevered. She secured donations and assistance from the Diocese of Savannah, from Cardinal Gibbons in Baltimore, and from many others.
Now, this would have been difficult for most anyone, but especially for a poor Black Catholic woman in late 19th century Savannah.
Seriously.
But Mother Beasley was nothing if not persistent and tenacious.
In 1898, another group of Franciscan nuns was sent to Savannah to help out, and they effectively took over the orphanage. Mother Beasley's tiny community dissolved at this point, with one sister dying and another leaving to join an order in the north. For herself, Mother Beasley continued working with the orphans, teaching and helping as best she could with her advancing age. She was given a cottage to live in near Sacred Heart Church, and she once again took up work as a seamstress, giving all she earned to the orphanage and other poor blacks in Savannah. By this point, her reputation as a great and humble woman of charity was known throughout the city by people of all faiths.
So it was a sad day on December 20th, 1903, when Mother Mathilda Beasley was found dead in the little chapel in her home. She was prostrate on the floor, hands clasped in prayer, arms outstretched, as though she had died in the midst of deep devotion. She was reaching towards the Blessed Mother. But it seems that Mother Beasley knew her death was near. Beside her on the floor was folded neatly the shroud and garments in which she wished to be buried, and careful instructions for her funeral and burial.
Her funeral mass was standing room only and was attended by Catholics and Protestants. So many had been affected by her generosity. In her obituary the following day, the Savannah Morning News said, "Protestants speak in the highest terms of her life and character, and among the Negroes the feeling prevails that they have lost their best and truest friend and benefactor. She was also called the idol of the poor, especially among the Negroes."
Since her death in 1903, her contributions to the community and the church have been recognized in many ways. In 1982, a city park was named for her in the city of Savannah, and in 2014, her cottage was restored and moved to the park, where it is now open to the public on certain days. There is not yet a cause open for her canonization. This has been American Catholic History. If you enjoy American Catholic History, please become a supporter. Get information on how to become a supporter at americancatholichistory.org/support.
Also on our website, sign up for our newsletter, learn more about Mother Mathilda Beasley, see about our pilgrimages, and find other great stories from American Catholic history.
We also love the great reviews our listeners leave. Those and the 5-star ratings help others find us. You can also email us feedback, questions, tips for episode topics, or other comments at feedback@americancatholichistory.org. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/American Catholic History, on Instagram at ACH_podcast, and follow us on Twitter, which is now called X.
Yep. Thanks, Elon.
And follow us on X at ACH1513. I'm Noelle Heaster-Crow.
And I'm Tom Crow.
Thanks for listening to American Catholic History, brought to you by the support of listeners like you.